One clear morning, the air in Cedar Grove Square was still and quiet as Serena Walker emerged from the steps of the old town hall. Her dress, a soft shade of orange, rested comfortably on her shoulders, catching the gentle morning light, as though the sun itself paused to admire the fabric's flow. Without hurry or show, Serena walked forward in measured steps, her presence inviting the world to give her space, and it did so without a word. The large hoop earrings she wore swayed gently with each footfall, and her hair, braided close to her scalp and gathered neatly at the nape, framed her face with an easy confidence. People who had been strolling or chatting under the trees found themselves pausing mid-sentence as they watched her. A passerby out for a quiet stroll stopped to look. A mother holding her child's hand tightened her grip as though sensing that something important was unfolding. Serena did not seek attention, yet her calm manner spoke loudly enough that everyone around her felt compelled to look on. The light breeze stirred the hem of her dress, creating a soft rustle that blended with the murmur of distant conversations. But no one spoke. Instead, they simply watched, and in their gazes you could almost read a shared question. Who is this woman, and what story does her walk tell Cedar Grove Square? Stone benches, the ornate iron lampposts, the tall oaks lining the plaza, all seemed to lean in closer as Serena moved forward. The morning sun warmed the orange fabric against her skin, making it glow like a quiet promise. There was no fanfare, no flourish, only a woman walking wholly herself in a crowd that recognized the unspoken message she carried. In that peaceful moment, it felt as though the whole square had fallen into a hush, listening to her steps and wondering what would come next. Nearby, a small group of young men leaned against the corner of a taxicab, smirking as they watched Serena. Their laughter was soft, more insolent than loud, until one of them let out a sharp whistle, a deliberate taunt meant to startle. Serena did not break her stride. Her head remained level, her gaze forward, yet her eyes flicked to him in a glance both calm and unyielding. In that single, steady look, she answered him more definitively than any retort could. Caught off guard by her quiet confidence, the startled young man cleared his throat and forced a strained laugh. Around him, the others exchanged knowing looks, as if daring each other to push further. But Serena's composure was a wall they could not breach. The morning sun still glinted on her orange dress, illuminating the gentle sway of the fabric like a flame refusing to be snuffed out. Her shoulders bare and held with ease spoke of a woman grounded in herself, someone secure enough not to react to taunts. Above the scene, a security camera mounted on a tall pole shifted its lens towards Serena. Its quiet motor hummed, capturing every detail: the soft curve of her shoulders, the way the golden light caressed the orange fabric, and the gentle movement of her braids. The camera's mechanical purr seemed to underscore the moment, as if the silent witness recognized the interplay of tension and dignity unfolding below. In the cab's shadow, the group of young men fell silent, suddenly aware that their mockery was being recorded, that their bravado stood exposed beneath the camera's unblinking eye. Serena continued across the square as though nothing had happened. Her every step measured her posture unbroken. Behind her, the morning buzz resumed, but for those who had witnessed her response, simple, direct, and unwavering. The lesson was clear. Strength need not be loud to be heard. Not far away, a black SUV came to a quiet stop at the edge of the parking area. Its engine had fallen silent, as if it understood and respected the hush that had settled over the square. There was no blare of music from its speakers, no rumble of acceleration, only a wisp of exhaust drifting upward. The vehicle looked as though it had been waiting for this precise moment, arriving without fanfare or announcement. Serena turned her head slightly, and the sound of her heels tapping the pavement grew steady and deliberate, each step punctuating the stillness around her. In that instant, the flow of cars and the casual chatter of passers-by all seemed to pause. Drivers glanced over their shoulders, pedestrians halted mid-stride, and even the pigeons on the fountain's edge ceased their cooing. It was not simply her appearance that drew their attention, but the quiet authority with which she carried herself. The orange of her dress caught the late morning light, glowing softly against the dark steel of the SUV's exterior. Her presence felt both natural and carefully measured, as though she belonged there more than anyone else, and the square had willingly offered its space to accommodate her. Those watching noted how she moved through that open area without hesitation. Drivers remained in their seats, eyes following her, rather than watching traffic signals or searching for parking spots. A woman pushing a grocery cart stopped, set down her packages, and turned fully to watch Serena pass. A man leaning against a lamppost stood straight at her, meeting her gaze for a moment before looking away, as if suddenly conscious of his surroundings. Even the security camera overhead seemed to linger its lens tracking her effortless stride. In every direction, observers felt a shift, a recognition that in this moment the world had granted Serena Walker a subtle, unspoken stage. She required no spotlight, no announcement. Her very movement through the square spoke volumes. And so the world paused, not out of duty, but out of respect for a woman whose silent confidence announced that she was exactly where she belonged. On the west side of Cedar Grove Square, Lieutenant Conrad Royce emerged from his patrol car, each step in his crisp uniform carrying the weight of authority. His posture was rigid, shoulders squared with a stern purpose that seemed to command the very air around him. The gold badge pinned to his chest glinted in the sunlight, more than just a decoration. It was the emblem of a career built on order and obedience. A small scuff marked the toe of his polished black shoe, a subtle reminder of an earlier disagreement with his superior over harsh language in the line of duty. As Lieutenant Royce's steely gaze fell upon the bright orange dress, his brow furrowed without greeting or hesitation. He did not offer a nod or a courteous word. Instead, he lifted the radio clipped firmly to his shoulder and pressed the transmit button. Potential subject: female wearing orange dress, Cedar Grove Square, he stated in a voice that landed like cold metal, dropped into water, precise, unyielding, and devoid of emotion. His words echoed briefly before fading into the radio's static crackle, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with expectation. Behind him, the patrol car's engine idled quietly, its presence a silent reinforcement of his authority. Passers-by paused as they crossed his path, partly out of respect for the uniform and partly out of curiosity about the woman in orange whom he had singled out. Lieutenant Royce's hat, creased to military specifications, cast a narrow shadow over his eyes, making his expression even harder to read. The sunlight caught on the badge above his heart, reflecting his belief that duty came above all else. In that moment, the square seemed to hold its breath. Lieutenant Royce did not move towards Serena or call for a backup. He simply observed her through narrowed eyes, allowing his command of the situation to speak for itself. The brief radio transmission hung in the air, a reminder that in his world, identification was literal and immediate. Someone in an orange dress here in Cedar Grove Square was now his concern. And as the lieutenant watched the world around him, remained still waiting to see what would happen next. Lieutenant Royce advanced towards Serena with deliberate slowness, his gaze tightening as though he were setting the rhythm for the entire square. There was no hurry in his step. The weight of his uniform and badge granted him unspoken authority, compelling everyone nearby to pause and wait. When he reached her, he stopped short, lifted his chin, and held his breath for a moment, studying her from head to toe, as if mapping every detail. "This is my district," he announced, his voice firm but leveled to address anyone glancing over his shoulder. "No performances here." Do you understand? His words weren't intended solely for Serena. They resonated outward, a reminder to all bystanders that he claimed control of this space. "I run this area, and no one gets to ignore that," he added, not beckoning, but asserting as though the actual act of speaking was enough to enforce his rule. Around them, there was no interruption, just the gentle rustle of wind weaving through the quiet crowd and the steady tap of Serena's heels against the pavement. She met his stare without flinching, her expression calm yet resolute, refusing to bow her head. While Royce's uniform gleamed under the morning sun and his posture radiated command, Serena's silent defiance spoke volumes. She neither acknowledged his claim nor retreated. In that tense standstill, the lieutenant's words hung in the air, challenging the square to remember whose presence was supposed to matter most. Yet Serena's composed stillness made it clear that she would not yield to his authority. Her refusal to lower her eyes served as its own response, radiating a quiet strength that belied the heaviness of his uniform. In that unspoken exchange, the square felt the clash of power and poise, a moment when control was declared and quietly refused all, without a single raised voice beyond Royce's measured command. Lieutenant Royce tilted his head slightly, his eyes methodically scanning Serena's figure as if hunting for some imagined fault he could use to justify his power. Serena stood perfectly still, her expression unyielding, a faint crease between her brows, signaling her quiet dismissal of his intentions. Royce's right index finger twitched near the waistband of his uniform trousers, the tiniest gesture betraying the momentary uncertainty of a man accustomed to always winning. "Show me your identification," he demanded, his voice edged with steel. Serena remained silent, her lips pressed together as though her resolve was made of stone. Frustration flared in Royce's eyes. Dressing like that and expecting respect. You must think the rules don't apply to you, he hissed, his tone more accusatory than polite. This is my jurisdiction and I make the law here. Without waiting for a reply, he reached behind her back and seized the fabric of her orange dress at the center of her spine, yanking it down as if to expose a secret. The abrupt motion startled onlookers into hushed disbelief. Though the tear in the cloth was small, its intent was clear: to humiliate, to assert that his uniform and rank trumped any claim she might have to dignity. Serena neither gasped nor recoiled. Her posture remained straight, her gaze looked on Royce with the steely calm of someone who has weathered harsher storms. Around them, the square held its breath, caught between the lieutenant's assertion of dominance and Serena's unspoken refusal to be diminished. In that charged moment, power and defiance clashed without a single word of protest from Serena, her very silence standing as a testament to her strength, even as Royce's grip sought to remind her that he believed he held all the cards. Yet she did not flinch, nor did she yield, conveying in that stillness that respect and authority are born of character, not uniform. Serena felt the sharp sting of fabric tearing as a thin line of red bloomed across her shoulder. The harsh sound cut through the hush of Cedar Grove Square like a defiant trumpet. Almost immediately, there was a sudden outcry from the edge of the plaza. A woman standing near a bakery cart flung a loaf of bread back toward Lieutenant Royce, her voice trembling with outrage. "What are you doing?" Nearby, a young man dashed forward shouting, "Let her go!" But hands grabbed his arms and held him back, yanking him away from the scene. Above them, the security camera swiveled down, zooming in on the ripped seam of Serena's dress, capturing every frayed millimeter of bright orange cloth. Its mechanical hum was the only sound that recorded that intimate moment of violation. Despite the pain and shock, Serena's face remained steady, her expression unchanged, as if the world around her were slowing to watch her stillness. Royce's anger flickered beneath the surface. He frowned, his uniformed authority trembling, as he remembered that he was not merely tugging on cloth, but trampling on someone's dignity. He leaned closer, the edge of his voice razor sharp. "Calm down. I'm just enforcing the law." His words sounded hollow against the rising murmur of the crowd, and he momentarily forgot that his own mouth was open, exposed to public scrutiny. Though blood trickled from her torn dress, Serena did not flinch. She did not step back or cry out. The square held its breath, caught between shock and disbelief. A uniformed officer claiming supremacy over a woman in simple attire. And while Royce tried to justify his actions with a clipped remark, the unwavering calm in Serena's eyes spoke louder than any declaration of authority. A heavy stillness settled over Cedar Grove Square, as if an invisible weight pressed on everyone's chest. Passers-by stood rooted where they were, neither rushing forward nor shouting, simply caught in the suffocating gap between law and justice. Across the plaza, a little girl clutched her mother's hand, her wide eyes brimming with disbelief as the world she believed in crumbled before her. Nearby, a bystander lowered his camera with a pained expression. He had been photographing the incident, but now pivoted his lens to catch Lieutenant Royce stooping to activate his body camera for the first time. "I'm not deleting that footage," Royce said, his eyes fixed on the ragged tear in Serena's dress. "It needs to be preserved." The moment those words left his mouth, a sudden gust of wind slammed the door of a parked car at the edge of the square. It sounded like a thunderclap, shattering the silence that Royce had tried to impose. Heads turned instinctively toward the sound, and in that instant, the invisible chains of silence began to crack. Some in the crowd exhaled as if freed from a spell. Others shifted, unsure whether it was safe to step forward. The little girl buried her face against her mother's side. Serena remained unmoved, her posture steady, though her shoulder throbbed from the cloth tear. Even as Royce straightened up, his body camera, flickering on the square, seemed to breathe again, no longer frozen but charged with the knowledge that recording injustice was the first step toward undoing it. The wind died as abruptly as it had come, leaving behind a charged hush. In that shared stillness, the bystander raised his camera once more, capturing not just Serena's pain, but the shifting pulse of a community discovering its own power to witness and resist. A black SUV idled at the edge of the square, its door creaking open as the engine's hum died away. From inside stepped a man in a crisp white suit, his posture calm yet undeniably commanding. He moved slowly, each footfall deliberate, as though the very pavement acknowledged his presence. The policemen stationed around Serena stiffened at once, straightening their uniforms and falling back a respectful step. Lieutenant Royce, momentarily unbalanced by the sudden shift in the scene, swung his head toward the newcomer. His brow furrowed when a younger officer leaned close and whispered, "Sir, that's Walker, Agent Travis and Walker." Royce. His heart quickened and his confident mask flickered as he stared at the man in white. Walker did not hurry forward. He simply let his dark shoes meet the pavement, standing tall and unhurried. His gaze fell on Royce with quiet certainty as though he already knew every detail of the confrontation that had just unfolded. Without a word, Walker reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a slim identification badge. The gold emblem caught the sunlight and glinted brighter than Royce's own polished badge. In that instant, the authority of Walker's presence eclipsed the lieutenant's uniform and rank. Royce's breath hitched as the weight of recognition settled in the square. This was not just any man, but a respected federal agent whose name carried gravity. The assembled officers remained motionless. Their initial tension softened into a tentative awe. Walker allowed the ID to hang for a moment, where everyone could see it, then lowered his hand as if the badge alone had spoken louder than any words he could offer. The afternoon light shimmered on the metal seal, and the silence that followed felt charged with a new understanding. In that brief pause, Cedar Grove Square itself seemed to acknowledge a shift in power, one measured not in uniforms or forced commands, but in the unspoken weight of truth and rank. Lieutenant Royce's body went rigid as though he could not move. Walker spoke softly but clearly, so everyone in the square could hear. "She needs no proof. She is my daughter." His words fell like lead on Royce's shoulders, and the lieutenant lowered his gaze. No one in the crowd clapped or cheered. They only watched Royce through the lenses of their phones' eyes, waiting for judgment, without a single word. Serena remained silent, her breathing steady, as she stood beside her father. Royce took 2 unsteady steps back, his hand falling to his side, no longer hiding any claim to authority. He scanned the crowd with a defeated look, aware that every camera was trained on him, ready to capture this moment. The square held its breath, watching the man in uniform confronted not by loud defiance, but by a simple, undeniable truth. A group of young people quietly gathered around Walker and Serena, lifting their phones for a live stream. The adults whispered among themselves while children watched. As if witnessing a miracle, Serena did not move forward. She simply stood her ground. A young officer approached Royce and asked softly, "Do you understand now?" Royce did not answer. His lips quivered, but no sound emerged. Walker raised an eyebrow and turned to Royce. "Do you know how many times my family stayed silent about you?" he asked. No one saw Royce respond. Instead, the faint beep of a radio crackled, announcing a code for urgent backup. In that moment, Royce realized that every detail, every word was recorded and could not be erased. The crowd held its breath as the weight of truth settled over the lieutenant. 1 week later, Royce sat alone in the interrogation room. In front of him, a softly glowing screen replayed the moment he tore Serena's dress. The walls were bare and silent, save for the steady tick of a clock. A narrow window crack let a cold breeze slip in, and he shivered despite his uniform. He gazed at Serena's face on the screen. Her calm, unflinching expression froze him like stone. Across from him, a female investigator scribbled notes, her pen moving in precise strokes that felt more like a formal indictment than simple record-keeping. "Do you understand what you're facing?" she asked without looking up. Royce lowered his head. No words came. He felt the weight of his own silence crushed under the memory of his daughter's steady gaze, her presence he once believed lost forever. The chill in the room deepened as he realized there was no escaping what the camera had captured. His only company was the flicker of that video and the cold breeze reminding him that actions recorded in daylight could never be unmade. From this story, we learn a crucial lesson about the power of silence and steadfastness. When authority is misused to impose fear and insult human dignity, resistance does not necessarily require shouting or physical confrontation. A determined gaze and composed demeanor can be enough to reverse the situation, forcing those in power to face their own wrongdoing. The message here is not just about denouncing injustice, but also a reminder that documenting and sharing wrongful acts helps justice prevail. If I were the character in that story, after ensuring all evidence was properly preserved and protected, I would continue advocating for education about mutual respect and organizing community discussions so that people understand the value of equality. I would collaborate with social organizations to hold small workshops in neighborhoods where discriminatory risks remain high. I would also work with legal aid groups to support victims of racism while urging law enforcement agencies to reform their internal policies. As for whether racism will completely disappear by 2050, the answer is a mix of hope and reality. Although society becomes more civilized over time, prejudices cannot be eliminated overnight. Progress depends on the attitude and actions of each person starting now. If every one of us strives to educate one another by 2050, racism might no longer be as widespread as before, but achieving a world entirely free of bias will remain a long journey that demands our continuous effort. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. All characters and events are creations of the author and are not intended to reference or criticize any real person. It is designed to raise awareness of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating one another with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice. Please consider this before viewing.